Hi, welcome to this video about socialization and the creation of a social identity. This is the first chapter of Sociology A level for Cambridge. And in this video, we're going to just focus on the first part of the unit, the process of learning and socialization. So I'm hoping to make this a three-part series where I'll be covering the whole unit. So that would include 1.2, which is social control, conformity, and resistance, and 1.3, which is social identity and change. And this will be for syllabus 9699. So this first part of the unit is divided into three topics: social construction of reality, nature versus nurture, and agencies of socialization. So starting off with the social construction of society, the main idea you need to keep from here is that society is a social construction. That means it isn't exactly like naturally occurring, it isn't natural, rather it's created by humans through historical and cultural processes. And then what you need to know would be a series of keywords, which are all listed in the syllabus. You might have heard these words before, you probably already know the meaning of them, but it's really helpful to know like the sociological explanation of them. So basically, culture would be a way of life, a way of living. Roles would be expected patterns of behavior. Norms, socially acceptable ways of behaving. Values, a belief of how something should be done. Beliefs are basically ideologies. Customs are cultural practices and behaviors. Ideology is a set of ideas about how society should work. Power is the ability to make others do what you want. And lastly, status is basically position in society. Then for each section, I've written some sociologists. I've written three for each. You would have to probably know more, but these are like the most basic ones. So for this part of the unit, you would have Anderson, which describes societies as imagined communities. So this goes back to the idea that society is a social construction. But of course, you need always to use sociologists, to back your answers up. So you would use him for that. Then Merton, he uses the term enemy to describe when norms and values are ignored and behavior can't be predicted. So he argues this would make a really risky and dangerous society. And then lastly, Goofman talks about how norms actually adapt to society. So if ideas change in society, then norms will change. Like people have the power to change norms, but they don't have the power to change rules and values, which are likely to stay the same across large period of times. Then nature and nurture is one of the biggest debates of society. I have society of sociology, sorry. And basically, this debate boils down to whether we act the way we do because of genetics, that would be nature, or socialization, which would be nurture. So on the nature side, you would have, as arguments, you could go into biogammas, how it's less effective to ignore genetic dispositions. You could go into natural selection, so more evolutionary psychology, where you would say like successful behavior is selected and reproduced. And then twin studies and adoption studies, where you would have to actually go and research them because you can't just mention them without mentioning examples. But basically, twin studies would be where two twins grow apart in different families, even different countries, and actually share many characteristics, and the personalities are really similar. That shows that there's something in genetics that shapes our behavior. And then adoption studies where children which are adopted actually are very similar to the parents, but they've never been raised by the biological parents. So again, that shows that genetics has a very strong, really has a strong impact in behavior. And then on the other side, nurture, you could go into how behavior changes across time and cultures. Again, you would have to search more studies for this. How environment may affect genetic disposition. The I and me debate, which shows social interaction is learned rather than natural. And then for all children, again, you'd also have to have some examples. But it shows that children learn by imitation. Like we're not naturally human, you could say, but rather we learn to be human by copying our parents. So this is a very typical exam question. You could get two possibilities, which are basically kind of the same, but you would answer them differently. Which would be evaluate the view that nature or nurture is more important than the opposite one, nature or nurture, in explaining human behavior. And here, that's why I like the previous slide. I talked about both sides because you would have to bring in both sides. And then in terms of sociologists, you would have for nature, Wilson is the one who says that we have something called biogrammars, which really affects the way we act. And then Parsons is the one who argues, yes, we can have certain power in ignoring them, but it's less effective to ignore them. And he particularly says this in regard of gender. He says that gender roles are natural, like we have been programmed, like females are programmed to be like the traditional female role and men for the traditional male role. And he says that if we ignore that, it is less effective. And then on the nurture side, you have like the general idea is self-awareness is taught, and there's three sociologists defending that idea. So there's Mead who says that there's like an I and me. So one is like our unsocialized self, and the other one is our socialized self, and how we learn because of society to become more socialized and care about what other people think about us. Then Goofman says people are actors. So he says we begin as we grow to take a role according to what people expect from us. Again, self awareness would be taught in that way because as you grow, you learn what society expects from you and you become more self aware. But that is not a natural process, but rather something that occurs because of socialization. And then Cooley, he addresses the same idea, but in a different way. So he says we use other people as looking glass selves. So other people are looking glass selves, and that means that we look at others, and then because of how they act in regard to us, like what we do or what we say, the way they react, it shows what they think of us. So again, self awareness is taught because we grow up and we get socialized by how others react to what we do, what we say. So next, socialization. So basically, socialization is carried by what sociologists call agencies of socialization. And in the diagram, you can see multiple ones. So we have family, peers, religion, work, media, and school. Those are like the main ones you would work in this unit. So they're also called agencies of social control because how they correct behavior, not just teach it, but also correct it, and how they use sanctions and rewards. So sanctions would be more punishments and rewards, well, the opposite, like positive rewards. Basically, they all teach the roles, norms, values of societies. They can also pass down ideologies, and they are divided into primary socialization and secondary socialization. So primary occurs in the family, and it's obviously the first stage of socialization, and then secondary socialization is all the other groups. So key sociologists for this part would be Berger and Luckman. So they argue that primary socialization is emotionally charged, whilst secondary socialization is more formal and anonymous. Then Parsons, he talks about how in primary socialization, like in the family, parents have particularistic norms and values, and children have an achieved status. Sorry, an ascribed status is wrong here. Versus in secondary socialization, there's universal norms and values and achieved status. So what this means is that in schools, all children are taught the same norms and values, which are more universal. Whilst in the family, parents might teach different norms and values from mainstream culture. That's why it's so important for children to go on to secondary socialization because it's, as we'll later see, a bridge to wider society to be able to fit in wider society. And in terms of status, it means once you're at school, you need to earn your status. So you need to either achieve hard or you need to kind of develop a place in your class. Whereas in the family, you're automatically given status. Either you're the older child or the middle child or the younger child. So in school, again, it is a bridge to wider society. In wider society, status is normally achieved. And then lastly, Parsons, he says secondary socialization liberates individuals. That is very related to this previous idea, which is basically that it is a bridge to wider society, that it liberates individual as in it opens up new possibilities. It socializes them into ideas they might not have been socialized before in the family, which is more a closed sphere. It lets the child like kind of go defining their personality outside of the family. So again, typical exam questions is also one that you're likely to get essay questions on. So you could have to what extent is and then a certain agency of socializations. So like the family or education, religion, I don't know, whichever agency of socialization, and then they would ask the most important agency of socialization. So they would ask which one basically is more the more important one. And then to what extent is primary socialization more important than secondary socialization, or you could have it the other way around as well. So this would be kind of like, now I'm going to go into the first question, like which genetic socialization is more important. Well, you wouldn't be asked exactly which one is more important. They would kind of ask you to evaluate if the one they gave you is the most important. So then you would discuss yes, and then evaluate, and then say no, and then evaluate that. So if you got the family, you can go into social control the family has. So sanctions, you could go from shouting to physical punishments, and rewards that you can talk about how they can use gifts, verbal approval, or facial expressions. So in terms of importance, you always have to try and bring like theories. So in favor, you would say you could bring in functionalists. They argue that it is the most important agent of socialization because it sets the basis for all later socialization. Also, as we've seen before, it's very effective as children have a personal connection with parents, which obviously isn't there in secondary socialization. Like children don't have such a close relationship with people carrying their secondary socialization out, so it's not likely to have the same impact and effect. And then in evaluation, you have the new right. They argue that family diversity in like nowadays means experience of socialization varies much, so the quality may be different, and not all families might be good at socializing. Not all families might actually socialize their children. Some might under socialize them. You can go into all that. Then postmodernists, they would say that in modern societies, both parents may have a full-time work, so socialization might be carried by others, as we'll see later. Most children spend more time at school maybe than in the family, or even on the media. And then others, so this wouldn't be theory related, but you can still bring in, this is for all of them actually, you can go into influence of other agencies, which also play a significant role. Then, in terms of sociologists for this section, you would have Herbert Mead, and he argues parents shape both moral and basic values. This is basically what we've been saying, but you would have like this sociologist's name to back it up. And also, he says that in the family, it's where children first learn a sense of self identity. That's why it is a very strong agency of socialization. Then you have Baumeister. He argues that parental love and approval are powerful motivations to conform, kind of links to the idea that before that children have a more emotional connection with their parents. So it's more powerful as an agency socialization. And then lastly, Anne Oakley. She says that the socialization power of the family has can be seen in how it carries out gender socialization. And in a later video, I might actually go into Anne Oakley, the ways that gender socialization is carried out in the family, or you can research it because it's actually really interesting. Then peer groups. So social control, you can go into like how sanctions might involve disapproving looks or negative comments, rejecting friendship, or even violence. And then rewards could be approving gestures, laughing at jokes, seeking friendship and company. So for importance, I don't have any theories for these, but you could apply some. Like in my essays, I would always try to apply some. But for you could say peer pressure is a very strong form of social control. Most people need to feel accepted is like essential for social integration. Also, during adolescence, it is arguably the main agency of socialization, as teenagers tend to listen more to peers and family or even teachers. Also, you can say that peers remain important throughout life, not just during school, but later on in life. In the workplace, you still have peer groups. And many people increasingly report friends being like their family. You could even mention, like, link this to postmodernists, perhaps. And then in evaluation, you can say, well, not all peer groups have the same level of influence. And also, people are selective of peer groups, so they tend to have similar norms, values, and interests in the first place. So, in that case, they would have little socialization power as they are already similar. So key sociologists in this, for peer groups, you have Hoogs. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, but he argues that peers are models we use for praising and shaping our attitudes, feelings, and actions. So that's quite a lot. So you can say it's very powerful as an agency. Harris, she argues that they use pull, desire to conform, rather than push, like overt bullying or even peer pressure. And then, quote, argues that in young adulthood, peer groups are more important than even family in how to live. So again, this could be related to maybe postmodernist even. Next, education. So into social control, we would have as in sanctions, failing to achieve qualifications and reputation of being unintelligent even. And then rewards, good grades, qualification, prizes, praise, and encouragement. Into importance, you could bring in functionalists and argue that um, it's very important because, as we said before, children internalize wider social values and norms, so it is a bridge to the wider world. And then Marches would say it's really important as the hidden curriculum teaches children about cultural relationships, a wide range of expected behaviors, and occupational norms, values, and roles. So you can go into Marxism and all that. And then other, so you could have, well, school is where children and adolescents spend most time at. Then in evaluation, you can talk about existence of counter school subcultures, so how it might not be that powerful. Some children choose to reject socialization messages at school. And again, well, influence of other agencies, which might also play a significant role. I didn't put this one in each slide, but this one could be in every place as evaluation. Then key sociologists, you can have Parsons. He says, well, schools emancipates children from primary socialization, serving as a bridge to wider society. Also, it allows children to internalize like society's values and norms a level higher. And then Bowles and Ginties, which these are Marxists, and Parsons is functionalist. By the way, schools prepare students to be uncomplaining workers. So again, it's probably more powerful than any other agency because of that. Then, in terms of media, so going into social control, sanctions could involve being pictured in a negative post, critical articles, and being publicly criticized. And rewards could include use of praise, positive pictures, and recognition. So, in importance, so postmodernists would argue that it has a special influence as young people have very easy access to technology and increasingly spend a significant amount of time in the media. Marxists would say they have a lot of power. It can be seen in how it has a very strong influence in supporting or weakening certain values. Also, socialization into media culture promotes consumerism and materialism. That also like it socializes people into just that, and the like power of that, like the effect of that, can be seen because culture, society as a whole, is becoming more consumerist and materialist. And lastly, it has been proven to influence individuals' beliefs, like mass manipulation, agenda setting. You can talk about all of that, how it is happening, it is occurring, and media is very powerful in regards to that. And then others, it is influencing and dividing what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And you could even go into the hypodermic syringe model, which suggests that people imitate behavior from the media. And then in evaluation, you can say, well, individuals might resist, interpret, or negotiate media messages based on agency. So they might disagree with what they see. They might take some of it, but not take all of it. Or they might even get a whole other idea, like interpreted it completely different to the actual meaning. So basically, this means people have an agency. They're not just socialized into whatever the media is showing. They have they have agency. That agency means like they can actually consciously think about what they're seeing, like critically and analytically. And also, media influence might be limited by selective exposure or media literacy. So, media literacy is really similar to agency, like that you know about the media, you can analyze it, and selective exposure. People might choose their own content. They might choose content they already like, so they're not likely to be socialized into a different ideas and everything. So, key sociologists, you would have Postman, who says in Western societies, media has replaced family in the 20th century and now is the main agency of socialization. So, he would be a postmodernist. Durkheim would say the media has a lot of power. He says it has a boundary making function. That means it actually decides what's right, what's wrong, what crosses the line. And then Potter argues that short term of the media include imitation, desensitization, and learning. And all of these also in the study, he's like proven all of them. And then I think this is the last one, religion. Social control, so you can go into sanctions. It depends on the religions. So, but these are just some ones. So it could be excommunication, going to hell, and rewards could be going to heaven or being reincarnated again. It really depends on the religion. But I just wrote these ones. But you can write different ones. So yeah, importance. So functionalists would argue that religion shapes moral values, and religious beliefs in general provide guidelines for living, and guidelines which are really powerful. In other half, like the ideology is very powerful, and sanctions and rewards too, because they are backed. Unlike most of other agencies of socialization, these have a very powerful ideology behind it, and people have a lot of faith and a lot of belief. So the sanctions and rewards are likely to be very strong, and are likely to be, as a consequence, very powerful. However, in evaluation, you can go into postmodernists, like they would argue, well, now there's secularization, religion is less powerful, has less social significance, so the influence of the media on socialization has, of religion, sorry, on socialization has declined. So, key sociologists, so Durkheim would say it is a very powerful social control because it brings collective consciousness as well. However, again, in evaluation, you could say, well, that's not really the case anymore because most of society isn't religious. Um, at least in Western countries, of course, and you can also counter-evaluate and be like, well, in other countries, that's not the case. Like there is still a very strong hold of religion. Parsons would say it establishes general principles and provides a value consensus. So again, it is very powerful because it socializes everyone into the same values. And then Woodridge and Micklethwait argues that in non-Western societies, indeed, it is the most influential agency. And that's the end of this lesson. I hope you find it really useful. If you have any suggestions or ideas for different videos, you can let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions for the videos. I don't know if I should speak more slowly or something. You can feel free to comment it. That's why the comment section is here. And well, if you found it useful, please subscribe, like the video, and maybe share with some classmates which might find it useful. And well, yes, I hope you have a good day.